some of you are jumping on and joining us. We're going to get started at about 12:02. So if you'll just hang on for a second, we'll give everyone a chance to get logged on. Good afternoon. My name is Katie Leffel, and I'm the director for the Oklahoma School Foundations Network. And I want to welcome you to our third in a series of 5 Fall Forum Fridays that we're hosting for school foundations across the state of Oklahoma. I'm really excited about our presentation today. But before I get to introducing our guests, I want to do just a couple of quick plugs for you all to make sure you know of some things that are happening and upcoming events that we're hosting. The first is that as I had mentioned, this is our third of 5 Fall Forum Friday webinars, and we have 2 remaining. The next one on the 23rd of October is going to be a really great look at the Education Foundation guiding principles that have just been released by the National School Foundations Association. We'll be joined by Wendy Van and Robin Callahan to talk about these new standards and how foundations across our state can use them to help benchmark where you are and make plans for your future. I know you won't want to miss the opportunity to hear that really exciting and important information. Registration is also open for our final Fall Forum Friday webinar, which is happening on October 30th. And that one we'll be hearing from our 3 newly announced Outstanding Program Award winners, one of whom is also presenting to us today. So if you haven't seen the announcement about our Outstanding Program Award winning programs, I would encourage you to head to our website and take a look at those and then register to come back on the 30th and hear about those outstanding programs. I know it'll be fun to hear what they have to say and what we have to learn from them. I also just want to remind you that our network provides a lot of opportunities for free networking, support, training, and on-call help for all Oklahoma foundations. You can reach out to me anytime to answer questions and to help your foundation. We also offer you all access to the National School Foundation Association through our state affiliate program. As a state affiliate, I can offer you half-price membership to the National School Foundations Association. And this year, more than ever, that's going to be a really exciting opportunity you want to take advantage of. As many organizations have, the National School Foundations Association this year is going to a virtual conference format. And that conference kickoff is happening right now on their website. And there are early bird registration deals available to National School Foundation Association members. So if you have been thinking about joining, I would encourage you that it's a great time to do that and to make plans now for that February conference, February 23rd through 26th online. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. If you've attended some of our other Fall Forum Fridays, we have left you all sort of in webinar mode and just watching, but our hosts today want to be a little bit more interactive. So before I introduce them, we are going to take just a minute and promote you all to panelists so that you can see each other, so that we can interact and talk with one another. So I'm giving you fair warning. You can go ahead and mute yourself if you don't want to be heard, and close off your video if you don't want to be seen. But we want to give you the opportunity to see one another and to ask questions as we go throughout the program today. And without further ado, I'm really excited to announce our two presenters for today's webinar. The first is Mr. Dan Billingsley, who is the Vice President of External Affairs at the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits. Dan joined the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits as its Director of Development and Marketing in 2012, and later became the Vice President of External Affairs in 2014. At the center, Dan oversees all fundraising, communications, public affairs, and government relations activities for the statewide Association of Charitable Nonprofits. In addition, Dan is a sought-after trainer, facilitator, and consultant specializing in fundraising, public policy, organizational development, and strategic planning. Dan also regularly speaks to groups both in Oklahoma and nationally about the importance of the charitable sector, philanthropy, and civic engagement. Prior to his work with the Center for Nonprofits, Dan oversaw public affairs duties for Thresholds, Illinois' largest nonprofit mental health services provider. And he continues to have a lifelong passion for mental health issues and substance abuse prevention and treatment. He has also worked in arts administration and arts advocacy, and has been an educator and adjudicator in performing arts and classical music for a number of years. Dan holds master's degrees in music and journalism, advertising and public relations from the University of Kansas. A lifelong Kansan, he's a proud KU Jayhawk, but will occasionally root for other Big 12 teams when necessary. Dan resides in Oklahoma City, where he's a board member of the Oklahoma Academy and the local board for Generation Citizen. So I want to welcome Dan. And then I also want to take a moment to introduce you to Miss Mary Mélon. Mary is the president and CEO of the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools and an absolute rock star amongst our foundation leaders in Oklahoma. And we're thrilled to have her here today. Mary joined the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools as its president and CEO of September 2014. The foundation's mission is to advance excellence, create champions, and build strong community support for lasting change in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. Mary believes in the future of Oklahoma City and strives to utilize her network and skills to align the foundation with the OKC Public School District, the business community, and the community at large to provide not only hope for every student, but the skills necessary to be productive members of the workforce and community. Prior to joining the foundation, Mary had a nearly 20-year career at the Journal Record Publishing Company. She was named publisher in September of 2001 and president and publisher in 2006. Her position included oversight and leadership of a 58-member Oklahoma team, as well as corporate responsibilities as a member of the senior management corporate cabinet and group publisher of daily group operations that included 5 additional markets. And finally, I know some of Mary's most proud accomplishments are that she has a wonderful daughter, Madison, who has graduated from Georgetown Law Center and serves as a public defender and supervisor of division courts for the Oklahoma County, a son-in-law, Taylor McLaughlin, who also works as a public defender for Oklahoma County, and the most important addition, Miss Willow Grace, is Mary's new granddaughter, who was just born in on March 27th of this year. So I want to welcome Mary and Dan and turn it over to them. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us. And Dan, before you start, I want to give a shout out to Toba Cohen-Dunning, who is online. She is from the great state of Nebraska and currently is the chair of the board of NSFA. So I am lucky enough to get to serve under her leadership as a board member of NSFA, and am delighted she's here. She's an amazing leader, and the work they do for the school foundation that she leads in Omaha is just incredible. So hello, Toba. She's quiet. So Dan, go for it.
Oh, well, thank you all. And yes, Mary, you're going to need to get your granddaughter's picture up here at some point. I'm sure you'll be able to share screen at some point. Oh, look, she's got it. Um, I just want to say, Mary and I have talked a little bit as a look at that. That's pretty amazing. Thank you. Mary and I have talked a little bit about, what we want to kind of convey today, but I said to Katie, hey, let's make sure everybody can chime in here because all of you have stories and we want to hear those because it's one thing. I'm going to give you some slides, but I think really it's about the stories that have been successful and have worked for us. And I say for us because I am a product of public schools. If you go to a family reunion, 50% of the people there are teachers and instructors and educators, and the other half are nurses. So we chose the professions where we're helping others. But I have to say that our jobs are so critical right now, especially in the state of Oklahoma, because our students need as many supports as possible. So as we talk through today, we're going to talk a lot about data and storytelling, but we're really going to say, this is what works with our constituents. And I know that Mary is going to share a lot through their strategic plan and their strategic thinking, how Oklahoma City has been really successful over the last several years. So we want this to be engaging, and do not hesitate to pipe up, say, give us an idea, write something in the chat. We'll keep track of that. So we want this to be fast paced and engaging. So I'm going to share my screen here and pull up just a, and by the way, you're going to have access to these slides through Katie. So I'm going to start here at the beginning. So what we're here to talk about today is storytelling. And if you've been around in the fundraising world for the past 10 years, we've been talking storytelling, because that's what has the impact, especially with our donors, policymakers, and you're going to have multiple audiences around this. But, the first thing I want to mention is, who are your audiences? This is something that sometimes we forget about. We think, oh, the only people we need to talk to are the people with money, or the people that can make some change. But the fact is, we have lots of different audiences, and we have to figure out what their characteristics are. What are their demographics? Think of yourselves as like an advertising agency. There are just certain demographics for people. My younger brother, I'm going to tell you, is the guy that he is Mr. Bass Pro Shops. He's Mr. Outback Steakhouse. He likes going and shopping at Target. He's going to drive a Suburban. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. That's a certain demographic, where you may have other demographics, people who are a rural professional, or maybe they are a parent, et cetera. So think about who your audience is, and then also figure out, what do they actually respond to? Because all of us respond differently to things. If we think about ads that we've seen, I mean, how many of you could write down 5 billboards you saw in the last 24 hours if you've been out and about? It's hard to do that because we're just inundated with images and ads. So what do people respond to? And part of that is, do they like facts? Do they want data? Do they want stories? Or is it really a mix? And then, when you're trying to reach this audience, you have to decide, hey, what do we want them to do? Because it's not just about writing a check sometimes. Sometimes it's that we've got to go talk with our policymaker. Maybe it's our legislator where we live, and we need them to act on something. So think about your audience. And Mary, maybe talk about a couple of the audiences that your school foundation really has to reach to make change in the community.
Well, we definitely define our audiences. We've got the district, that's an audience, and everyone that works within the district, from the administrators, top leaders, all the way down to support staff at our district. So that's an audience. We have families, as an audience. We have our donor base, which includes corporate foundations and individuals. And we have state and local leaders who need to hear from us, and who certainly, as all of us engage as leaders of our education foundations in various markets, we need our state leaders to understand the impact that we have and the important work that we're doing. We have to have a seat at that table. So as we define those audiences, we can craft messaging individually, although a lot of it is very overlapping. And I think one thing that I think probably all of you would say the same thing, but something we struggle with here is the ability to share the needs that our students have. And this is to the community and the donor base and state and local leaders. They have to understand our needs. We've got 90% of our kids living in poverty. We've got high ACEs scores in our student population. We've got lots of struggles. At the same time, we want to share success stories so that people don't throw up their hands and say, well, it's just not fixable. Public education is just broken and we just all have to go a different direction. So it's this balancing act of the story about how much we need the community's help, how much we need to fight for funding at the state level versus it's worth fighting for, and here's why you should care. Yeah. So bottom line though is it starts with who our audience is.
Absolutely. And I know I'm close with Elizabeth Embody, who heads up Jinx, their public school foundation. And she has said many times.
She's on here today, I think.
Is she?
Yeah.
I am. I'm showing my face. I needed a heads up on that.
There we go. Well, Elizabeth, do you want to chime in here? Because I know we've had that conversation about the whole, we're a suburban school district, so we can't possibly have any problems, right? I mean, yeah. Can you kind of talk to that for a minute?
Absolutely, yes. That's the perception that Jinx is a wealthy district, and that's been my biggest challenge. And we do have a lower free and reduced rate lunch percentage as some of our other public schools, but certainly doesn't mean we don't have funding challenges. So, and one thing, just in listening to you talk about identifying your audience, it is true. And often what I think can happen is when you have a perception of what we have a perception of what our audience is. Many of our parents who we would perceive as potentially not donors we've received quite a few donations from them because we give them opportunities to support the foundation at a level that they can with our Trojan 20. So that has been a great funding revenue for us when we reach out as a broad-based funding, in a small way. So that's been great. And a new audience for us this year, which I'm really excited about, are our employees. So we've been working with our superintendent, Dr. Butterfield, and that this month in October is the month of giving. So our employees, 1,500 of them who have not been they've been an audience for us, but not in terms of a fundraising audience. I mean, they've definitely been an audience for us in terms of programming support for them, but now they are giving them an opportunity to support this. And it has been really heartwarming to see how supportive they've been by just giving them an opportunity to support the foundation through this month of giving. And we've worked with our CFO on that. So, but back to what you were saying, Dan, it's hard work because we don't appeal to a lot of the family foundations, the larger foundations here in Tulsa because of that perception. And that's okay. I mean, that is okay. I'm thrilled that they support our other education foundations, but that makes our work a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what Elizabeth just said, and this is important, is as you're thinking about your audiences, and I just threw several up here, but I think you could all get around a whiteboard or some butcher paper and really nail this down. But every audience out there needs communication, and they're going to need to hear the stories, because again, it's not just about opening up checkbooks or pocketbooks, but it's also, rallying your cheerleaders and telling the story of your district beyond just the walls of those schools. The other thing, that's really important, I think Mary has a really great story about this, are you've got to identify what your actions are. So you've got an audience here. Well, what do you want them to do? And as Elizabeth pointed out, they had employees in the district that they never really made an ask of. So the new action is support your schools, support the people you love, the people that you're around. So, as you're identifying these, you have to say, who are we and what do we do? And what are we asking them to do? And you have key actions, and you've got to focus. But I always say, be very direct in what you're asking somebody to do. If you're asking them to donate money, don't be wimpy about it. Just say, we need you to donate today, give today. If you need people to advocate, and particularly if you are grassroots lobbying, you have to say, call your legislator today, and this is the message. And don't send an email, don't send a postcard, call them and tell them, I'm a constituent in your district, and this is what I need you to do for our schools. And if you need people to share, let them know what to share and give them those talking points. Again, you've got to be just really direct in how you are approaching your different audiences. And Mary's going to talk here about kind of their plan and how they identified the results. And I love this, key performance indicators, of what tells us what's successful or not. So Mary, talk to us a little bit about this plan.
Yes. So I think it may be sort of hard to read up here, but I'm happy to share it with you. I will say that this has been a labor of love, getting everything we do in a concise enough framework that we can fit it on one page. This is the front page of it. A little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to share the back page of it, which is our dashboard and our metrics for our outcomes, which is the other piece of what we're talking about today. But I feel like we're all in the same boat here. It is not the easiest thing to explain to people what we do as education foundations, starting with the very fact that foundation is in our name or in most of our names. And I don't know about you, but what I hear from people is they have this perception when they hear about us that we are sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars and we're managing funds to distribute. We know that's not true, because we have to go out and raise every single stinking penny that comes our way. A lot of us have endowments, which is great, but I know our endowment, which I'm thrilled to have, is for a specific purpose. And so it's not just to hand out whenever we want. And so because we're starting a little bit behind the curve, because we have to explain, no, we're not that kind of foundation. We support our school district in having a clearly defined mission and vision, core values. And then what's really worked for us is to have some key strategic focus areas. And strategic is something that I use in every conversation that I have about our work. Because if we're not being strategic, if we're just going here and there and everywhere trying to fill immediate needs, we're not really fulfilling our mission, which is advancing excellence and creating lasting change for Oklahoma City Public Schools. So that strategic piece is so important, and it's embedded in every conversation I have about our work. But we put this roadmap together, is what we call it, is our roadmap, and it is unlike a typical strategic plan that is 85,000 pages long and sits in a notebook on your shelf. It really is a piece that we can look at, we can refer to, we can show community members, internal and external audiences, what it is that we do in a clear, concise way. And each of our focus areas certainly have long plans that are tactical in nature, that the community doesn't have to see that. The community needs to see, here's what we're about, here's what we do, and then they have to see, here's what we measure, and here's the impact that we're having. So this piece really was a big step for us. We used to have a big packet that had all these pages in it that it would be so confusing to show people, and people's eyes would glaze over. I tell people I felt like the guy in New York City. You're walking along and he opens up his jacket and has, 50,000 watches or necklaces hanging inside. I felt like that's how it was to explain what we do. And this roadmap has really helped us be very concise with our message of who we are. And that's what it starts with, is this is who we are. It also says who we're not. We can't do everything for every single need in Oklahoma City Public Schools, which is why I really, by design, we use this filter. A good strategy isn't just what you will do, it's what you won't do. And we thought long and hard. I had some amazing board members who worked with me on this, thought long and hard. Do we want the external audience to see that statement? And I kept coming back to, I absolutely want the external community to see that statement, because of the plethora of phone calls that I get with people wanting to donate strange crap, or wanting us to get involved with things that are really important, but not really in our wheelhouse. This helps me say, this is who we are. This is what we do. We cannot do everything, but this is what we do. It's not to say that some of these focuses may or may not change over time. They've changed in the 6 years I've been here. But it's our place, it's our blueprint. And we spent a lot of time on it. So I think my encouragement to you all is to spend the time on it, get your board members involved with it, get some stakeholders involved. I had lots of conversations about this with our superintendent and our deputy superintendent and other members of the leadership team on the superintendent's cabinet, to make sure that we were aligned. Because go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Mary, you kind of sing my song, and I know, having worked with Elizabeth at Jenks too, I mean, if we don't have a plan, if we don't have a strategy, and I think even more importantly, if we don't have a platform to say, this is what, I love how you say this is what we will do, and this is what we won't do. Because I think there's just so much out there around how we help our public schools, that it is important for us as fundraisers and friend raisers and policy changers, that we have a roadmap for that, and that we have a platform for that, because that's what we have to stand on. Otherwise, you're right, we get pulled into 1,000 other directions that aren't strategic, and we're not taking the time to really focus on what is strategic. So I really appreciate you sharing your plan. And as Mary said, we're going to send out all of this afterwards, so you've got a copy of that. So again, these messages, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I am going to see, I want you to really appreciate that every message we have has to have a why. Why should you donate? Why should you make this change? Why should you reach out and share, etc.? Because the why is the core of the message. If you ever read the book called Start With Why, and it's by Simon Sinek, I'll put it in the chat here in a little bit. He says, if all we do is talk about what we do, that's not very interesting to people. And then if we start talking about how we do it, sometimes we inundate them with way too much information. But if we start with the why is public school so important, especially right now? Why is affordability important? Why is making sure that we prepare our workforce important? That's the core of the message. And I think what Mary said about having that strategy behind it, having that platform behind it, just strengthens that message. The final thing I want to say is everything has a medium. And some media are better than others. You're not going to do a newspaper ad for an action alert. You're going to send an email. You're going to send a text message. You're going to pick up a phone. But if you are sending out a solicitation, and I will say, please reach out to Elizabeth, especially the Trojan 20 program was pretty astounding to bring in those small donations from lots of diverse people. And what you can do with that is then take that list and potentially get larger and larger donations from them or more action from them, et cetera. But, she identified the media that worked, which is going to be things like direct mail and email and social media, and also getting the parents involved, and particularly her board involved in that. I remember, Elizabeth, and you might touch upon this, how your board was involved in that Trojan 20 program.
Sure. Well, and we have continued with the Trojan 20 program, and it's still a great resource. First, before I touch on that, I'll just say one of the reasons I think it was successful is we make it easy to give. Not only do we use electronic messaging, but we put, our campuses are a little different. We have big campuses instead of a lot of small campuses. We have fewer really large campuses. So we were able to send envelopes home with our elementary students, and they could bring those envelopes back. But we always use our board members as tools, and helping them. Our board is diverse in the fact that they have children at each site, different sites, and so asking them to be specific advocates at those individual sites was helpful. Obviously, we always ask them to share our messaging on social media, but we did. We use one of our board members actually, who's graphic design, helped us with the brand. I mean, that was really important too, was the branding. We branded that fundraising initiative, and it's part of, when you donate to the Trojan 20, you're part of the advantage that our students receive at Jenks Public Schools. And the Trojan Advantage is an annual giving program. So it all links well together. But yeah, thanks for bringing it up. It's our annual giving programs at Jenks is something that we really didn't have developed well, and we have worked on that in the last few years, 4 or 5 years actually. Most of our revenue was coming from special events, so having the revenue stream of annual givers has made, and we have an advocate program for corporate giving, and we align a lot of marketing benefits with that, because a lot of those companies are interested in the marketing benefits they receive as a donor. So
we've done the same thing, Elizabeth, and I hope that everyone is, if they haven't realized it before, putting too much dependence on special events for income didn't work so great this year. Though I know a lot of us have transitioned and found ways to make it work, but it just can't be your primary fundraising source. And we've copied Elizabeth's Trojan 20, and we're launching our version of that called the Friends of the Foundation in another month. So yes, you inspired me at that last meeting I saw you at.
All right, well, thanks. Good. I'm happy about that.
And I want to say, one of the things that makes a good fundraising program successful is, of course, going to be diversity in that fundraising, because I wholeheartedly agree with Mary. I have said to the entire nonprofit sector, we are addicted like you wouldn't believe to special events. And when you can't have those special events, it starts to make fundraising a lot harder. So diversifying, and again, it's your message and it's your media, and also what action you want them to take.
Let me jump in here and say about special events, one final thing, because I've spent a lot of time analyzing our events and looking at the margins, and having them virtually or changing them completely has made my margins go way up. And then when you factor in the staff time that it takes to put on events, which is absolutely grueling and probably really difficult to measure the real cost of it, you could take that energy, start some new programs, reach more people potentially with something virtual than all the work that it takes. We still need to have them. I'm a proponent of having fewer of them and making them better.
I agree with you, Mary. I'll have to say real quick, we do have an audience so that loves our event. Our event, we're fortunate. I mean, our biggest problem is we don't have a big enough venue in Tulsa to accommodate our parents that want to attend. And so, but I think what you just said in the end is having like a really good event instead of having so many.
Yeah. So we are talking about data today, and I'm going to run through a few more slides fairly quickly because I think most of us understand data, but data needs to be part of the story. And I'm going to show you some examples here of why data can really change your story and really strengthen it. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be precise, and it needs to be effective. And don't forget that it's really about outcomes. And you see this kind of fake example down here, but this is what gets donors and people who you're calling to action. This is going to get them to act because what they want to see is outcomes. And I will also say in the charitable sector, period, people donate to change makers. They don't donate to service providers. They want to see a change. You know, if it were 35 years ago, a lot of us would have ashtrays in front of us because people were still smoking in the office. 35 years ago, we weren't wearing seatbelts. We weren't even using car seats. It was nonprofits that changed the trajectory on that. And those are the kinds of things that people really want to donate to. They want to volunteer for, they want to get behind, and they want to cheerlead. So that's why this outcome is so important. You know, the data is out there, but you've got to decide, and this is an important conversation to have sooner than later. What data do we already have available? There's tons of stuff within your own school system. So find out everything. It's everything from graduation rates to free and reduced lunch rates, but all the way down to how many kids are riding the bus versus how many kids are being dropped off. How many of our students come to school in the morning without a breakfast? This is the kind of data that is going to be useful in your crafting your messages. The other thing to think about is what data do you not have that you really want and how easily you could get it. You know, I'm going to talk for just a minute about how you can get this data without having to buy it. I mean, it's available to you. And remember that this is all about making a case to donors, parents, all of these different audiences. So Mary, what are some of the most critical pieces of data that you use on a regular basis?
Well, and if you want to flip ahead to my dashboard, I'm happy to jump in and show everybody that. The most important part for us is to show that what we're doing, our specific focus areas and strategic plan, is how it is impacting our school district. So there, like you said, there's qualitative and quantitative. There is also the obvious. Find the obvious that's right there for you. Track your financial impact that you're having, track the number of students you're reaching, track the number of schools you're helping, track the number of teachers you're helping in whatever form you are. If you're doing teacher grants, you should have data on exactly how many dollars you gave out, exactly how many teachers got a grant, exactly how many students those grants impacted. How you get that data is, it's going to be different for everybody. With our various programs, for Donors Choose, we get some great reporting that we don't have to manually pull together, which is wonderful. Our Partners in Action initiative, we get some sort of manual, sort of automated data through the database that we use. Some of it, though, is a lot of just keeping track of things on spreadsheets. But the most important part is we do track it and we share it. So this is the back of the roadmap where we have lined out our 3 focus areas and some key performance indicators from each one that we update regularly. So we have a focus on providing innovative support for teachers, classrooms, and schools. There's what we do with Donors Choose. Part down at the bottom is Partners in Action, all of the impact pieces. On this focus area in particular, academic performance and teacher retention, Dan, you touched on that. These are a lot trickier to get your hands on, and they're a lot trickier to directly correlate to the work we're doing. But Donors Choose, for example, has done some research studies and have found that academic performance is shown to be increasing in classrooms where Donors Choose projects are being utilized. That's amazing, and that's a game changer for us. So we're using that data. We're in the process of doing a teacher survey right now because we also believe Donors Choose funded classrooms will correlate to teacher retention. So that's that piece of it. Then in growing teacher recruitment and retention, which is also a focus of ours, we have the basic stuff of this is how many participants we have in our pipeline program. This is the graduation rate. This is what Urban Teacher Prep Academy does. Over time, that's going to turn into be really significant numbers. But what it does now is say we're moving the needle. We're moving the needle by growing teachers that look like our students, and then building advocates and so on. So I think that's the key thing is track the obvious, track the obscure, which is what I would call graduation rates, test scores, teacher retention, anything that you can directly or even indirectly correlate to your work. And then the other piece that isn't showing up on this dashboard, but you have to be prepared with it, is to track what I would call the anecdotal, track the stories. And as you're sharing data, you also have to fill in with, well, yeah, and I get Facebook messages on our foundation Facebook pages with moms saying, this really happened just a couple of weeks ago, a mom saying, I have 5 kids. My husband lost his job. Our world is collapsing. Can you help us with school supply kits for my kids? That's a real story. That's what's happening in our families in Oklahoma City, and the work we're doing at the foundation to raise money for school supplies is making a huge difference. We can share the numbers. We've raised $150,000. We bought 5,000 school supply kits, but what brings it all home, and Dan's going to talk about this later, what brings it all home is, yeah, we heard from a mama whose world is collapsing, and we're helping her 5 kids.
Yeah.
So those stories have to be filtered into everything you do as well.
Absolutely. And, I want to say to all of you, these placemats or dashboards that we call them, they don't have to be the prettiest things in the world, but what they need to do is be able to tell a bit of a story themselves. And I want to really encourage you, make sure that your boards are seeing these, make sure your superintendents are seeing these, make sure some of the students see these. I think especially high school students understanding, and you can even craft these for elementary school students to see the difference that's being made because of the generosity of others and because of the leadership out there that we care. The worst thing I think we can do is get data and then sit on it. We need to share that data. And just as Mary said, there's the obvious stuff, there's the more obscure, there's the data out there that you can get from other sources. Just because you didn't come up with it doesn't mean it's great. It could be really great data. So I'm sure that are, you know, if you need further copies of these, I know we have some, Mary has hers that will come out, but I got to say these dashboards really do great things, especially for boards and people who are trying to raise money on your behalf. So I want to touch upon a few ways you can get data. If you say, I'm struggling to get some data, here are the best ways to do it. Number one, surveys. But surveys are best for collecting quantitative data. If the survey is too qualitative, you're going to have a really hard time trying to get that down and distill it into something that everybody can understand. However, just because you've done a survey, it doesn't mean you don't need some of that anecdotal data. So think about doing interviews with people. I mean, come up with a set of 5 or 6 or 7 questions and call people and say, I just want to ask you these questions and get your answers. Listening sessions, put groups of people together, ask them questions and listen to what they're saying. Focus groups. I think a lot of people get focus groups and listening sessions they think they're interchangeable, but really focus groups are used to test ideas that you have to see what works best. Okay, so one of the things I would suggest doing is coming up with an annual survey that you send every year that you don't change much, because what you're trying to do is get benchmarks for that data. And then the second thing is interview people and then listen to people. And then if you have a new idea, test it with people, even if it's just your board or a fundraising committee or an advocacy committee. Test that, because that's going to give you the data that you know is going to work well. And that helps you make more strategic decisions. Mary, what kinds of things did you use as you were putting your plan together?
Well, we have used surveys, definitely. And we as we put this dashboard together, and I shared on chat that this, like the roadmap, is relatively new. So we're still in the design process with that, so it's not published. But what we did was really think through the real obvious that we've always tracked, and made a real conscious decision to try to start keeping track of that more obscure impact stuff, like what are we doing for graduation rates? What are we doing for teacher retention and those kind of things? And that kind of data we're having to get from our district.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, you know, if you're an educator, you're going to recognize this, but kind of the Bloom's taxonomy of data. What we're really trying to do is not just get the data so that we know it. What we're trying to do is analyze it and synthesize it so we can create really great stories. So it's not just the numbers, it's the anecdotes, it's the outside information that we have that we synthesize together so that we can create a story. Remember to be precise. Don't inundate people. You know, one of the things I tell people is never use more than 1 point of data in one sentence or 3 points of data in one paragraph. The problem is we start getting inundated. In fact, that's why we want to use graphics, you know, these infographics. And you saw several of those examples from Mary. This is something I'm just going to tell you is critical. You have to be absolutely honest in your graphics. Because if all you have to do is pick up a newspaper or look on television, and you will see people manipulating data to confuse or even coerce people. And I know Mary, as a former publisher, has seen this plenty. I mean, I've seen it when people give speeches. So make sure that whatever you're putting out there is honest data, because if someone calls you on the carpet for it, you're going to be very embarrassed and you will lose credibility when you are.
Yeah, be your own best fact checker.
Yeah, absolutely. And data informs, of course, but stories produce the emotion, the thought, the contemplation, and the action. We call this head, hands, and heart. So head, hands, and heart is that you've got to get to people's heads, but you've also got to get their hands, because they make decisions about giving or other actions because they're personally involved in the process. And I think, you know, in looking at the best campaigns out there, you know, look at our United Ways in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Those days of caring are so important because it gets people's hands involved in the process. And any way that you can get parents, teachers, students, policymakers, everybody involved in the process, the more likely they're going to be to give, and more importantly, they're more likely that they're going to have others give. And then, of course, there's the heart, because people are drawn to action by an emotional response to stories. We make fun of those ASPCA commercials, you know, with Sarah McLachlan and the little one-eyed dog and everything, and they're sad. But the fact is, they're geared to get an emotional response. And so any way that you can get the cerebral response, the tactical response, and the emotional response, you're going to have the best story out there. I'm going to give you one story and just give you some facts, and then talk very briefly about how this works. So here's some data facts. So this gets to the head. People with mental illness have a life expectancy 25 years less than the general population. So a person with mental illness usually dies by 51. They have co-occurring physical disorders. So it's everything that they smoke too much, they eat too much, they've got high blood pressure, all of that. Diabetes is rampant. And this is a statistic that a lot of people are very shocked by. 90% of people with schizophrenia are heavy smokers, meaning 2 or more packs a day. So, you know, all of this says to us, man, people are really unhealthy when they have mental illness. And why that is they don't have a lot of access to good physical health care. In fact, for years, doctors said, hey, just keep them on their meds and that's good enough for them. But the fact is, we know that quality of life is important for people living with disabilities. So here's the hands of this. Groups of new employees for a major accounting firm were building bicycles, adult bikes, as a team building activity. And each of their sessions, they had several per year, yielded about 25 adult bicycles. Well, where do you donate these? So they donated them to an organization I worked for doing mental health work. And we would get these batches of bicycles in 2 or 3 times a year. And we just decided we were going to give the bicycles to the clients free of charge, along with helmets, locks, the whole shebang. So what do you think happened to those bikes? Anybody want to throw in, what do you think happened to those bicycles?
Dan, I want to say that they were ridden and loved, but I'm not sure if that's the Pollyanna in me being unrealistic.
Well, Katie, you are the Pollyanna, but you're totally realistic. They not only rode them, because everybody always says, oh, they probably just sold them. You know, no, they didn't. They rode them so much that they needed regular maintenance, and we had to hire somebody on contract to help fix these bikes. I mean, they went nuts over having bikes because they now have transportation. And so this transportation led to transformation, as I like to say. So they ended up creating a bicycle club, and they would go around Chicago every Saturday, and they had T-shirts, and they had a great time because of these bicycles. But here's the other outcome that came out. Not only did they have real transportation, many of them quit or greatly reduced smoking. And we were able to take a principle called stage-based interventions to them about quitting smoking, because they knew that they couldn't smoke and ride their bikes. We did pre and post testing on health outcomes. 70% of the people that had a bike had better health outcomes after getting them. And one guy, this is the real heart of the story. There was a guy who lost 100 pounds, he quit smoking, and he was the advocate for this. He would go out and talk about, physical health care, particularly for people with mental health issues. So this outcomes, you saw up here, there's the data, but there's also the hands, and there's also the heart, and they're the outcomes right here. And we were able to raise money for the program on top of the donations of the bicycles. So those are the things, as we're developing our stories, I just want to say work well. What doesn't work well are things like, we don't have any money. The state stopped giving money to the schools, because frankly, there are a lot of people out there, as Mary will say, that think, oh, the schools are terrible. Why would we invest more money into something terrible? Well, this is what people want to invest in. They want to invest in outcomes, and they want to invest in happy endings. So who wouldn't want to donate to that? The last couple of things I want to say, and we're going to open it up for some questions, but don't forget to make sure your stories are inclusive. This is really important. Make sure that you're not featuring the face that we normally see. We need to see the faces of the people that we're serving. So make sure there's diversity and inclusion in your stories. The other thing is the stories have really long shelf lives. Over here in Tulsa, the United Way, we have an ambassador, Emeka Nanaka, who is a person with a disability, uses a wheelchair, but he has been our advocate for the United Way for 12 years. And I gotta say, he's so recognizable now that people associate him with United Way giving. So don't forget, these stories have long shelf lives. Don't think you need 20 stories per year because you think people are going to get bored. No, if you followed a student from kindergarten to high school, okay, and graduation, that's a story. And even though it's a 13-year story, it's an important story. And then finally, stress the action. What do you want them to do? Just let the data and the anecdotes help drive your audience to those actions. So that's kind of it for me. And I know Mary will probably have a few things to chime in with here, but please ask questions or any ideas you have that have worked.
I'll throw in kind of my closing summary of how to approach it. And I think starting with my sharing of that strategic plan, it's really important to spend the time on developing the plan, and then spend enough time on the collaterals and on your communication plan so that it's put together. It doesn't have to be the fanciest graphics in the world, but have something that's visually appealing, and be concise as much as you possibly can. Be concise with your messaging. Don't be the guy that has the 85,000 watches in his coat to sell you on the street corner, and be consistent. And Dan just said this, frequency of messaging is so important. So you really may get tired of telling the same story over and over again, but it's okay. Keep telling the same story over and over again, that share who you are, what you do, some anecdotal stories of who you serve and why. And all of that working together with frequency will help people understand just how important our work is. And whether they have kids in your school district or not, everyone needs to care about our future citizens and about our kids, and making sure that our kids have what they need.
Can I throw in just for a little plug to especially some of our guests on the webinar that might be from smaller foundations that don't have staff? I just wanted to make the point that in order to make your foundation look good, you do not have to have full-time staff and people who know how to do all of the great graphics. There are a lot of free programs that are out there that can make you look really good and really professional. One that I use all the time in my work is Canva. And Canva has a million templates, a million plugins, a million ways to start something and put your own information on it and wind up with something that looks really terrific. And that's definitely something if you're looking into and wanting some support, or even just wanting someone to take a look at, hey, would you look at this and tell me what you think? I would be so happy to work with any of our foundations in helping put together a dashboard or critique your dashboard. I'm available for that.
And I just put some in the chat, find some of those recent grads and they may be in journalism school, have them come collect the stories for you. Use your volunteers, use those people who have lots of skill sets out there, because, some of us, Mary and I, we do come from really strong marketing backgrounds. And so we kind of think like that, but if you don't, that's okay. There's somebody that's going to be able to help you with that.
Absolutely. And that's a good skill to, as you're recruiting board members, find somebody that does that for a living or has a real propensity for that.
One thing that we're doing this year, we're trying this. I'd love to see what you'll think about it. But our board members, all of them are going to be assigned one of our funded programs. So at Jinx, we fund more, programming than just individual grants, but broad-based programming. So each board member has been assigned to be a funded program liaison. And then an administrator is also assigned, who runs that program. They're coordinating their efforts with them. So the effort is for them to learn more about the programs that we're funding as board members. And then because I am a staff of like 1 2/3, and then coming back to our board and sharing anecdotal information that they've received, anything that actually is outcome information, so they can present that to the board. And so we can, understand, they can understand, have a better understanding of what they're funding, but then also that we can use all that information for marketing, so we can put together more stories. And so I'm excited about it because I think it will, one, engage the board and they'll feel more attached to the programming and more ownership, and we can use it for marketing. But then it also will help us get, at the end of the year, I'm always asking our administrators for outcomes. And that's really hard sometimes for them to stop what they're doing and provide, the outcomes from the program when we support it. So hopefully it'll be ongoing, so it won't be such a burden on them. Because as we've started funding more programs, we've just gotten to this point, like where we are a little bit acting like a foundation, even though I know, Mary, that's not really what we are, but we really are a little bit. We need to make sure that we understand, because the programming is generated from the school, not from the foundation. We're just the financial support of that.
Yeah, Elizabeth, that's awesome. And you are the master of engaging people. So I think that's something so many of us struggle with is getting a lot of board members' engagement. As we did this roadmap, I pulled in, I will have to admit, some people that I cherry picked that I knew would be really, really good at this strategic discussion, but it wasn't a full board thing. It was a small group thing that we would then report out to exec and report out to the full board. But it got some people engaged in our work in new and really meaningful ways that we hadn't done since I first came to the foundation 6 years ago. So that engagement by board is so valuable. And assigning people, following up on programs, I love that. May steal that one too. Got to think
in full transparency too. I mean, I had the privilege of working with Elizabeth, I think in 2017 on some of that strategic work. And I'm going to echo both Elizabeth and Mary. Sitting down and really getting into strategic planning is going to be a game changer. And you don't need anything fancy to do it. I mean, if you just throw some butcher paper up on the wall or a big whiteboard and just write down your ideas and organize them, it really is going to be a game changer for your foundation, because it gets everybody in the same car on the same path. And as Mary said, it's a roadmap, and you all want to be on the same road.
The other thing, Dan, that I've seen with strategic planning efforts is that once you say it out loud in a group, everybody feels empowered to actually do the things. And sometimes on boards, we sit and we talk about ideas, but we don't necessarily vote on them, or we don't necessarily know that we have agreed as a group that that's what we want to pursue. And so that's something that I've seen is really valuable when boards take a minute to do some strategic planning, is that everyone's agreeing on these goals. And now as a board member, I feel okay about saying, hey, I have a skill to do that. We've said we want to do it. It's in the plan. Now I feel like I can go do it. Whereas before, if there's no plan, then I don't want to feel like I'm a rogue board member out there doing stuff that not everybody is on board with, if that makes sense. So just like you say, getting everybody on the bus, giving everybody that permission slip, here's what we need to do. Now you can run with it. And I think that that's key too.
And it really, it's very difficult to determine your messaging and storytelling and figuring out what you want to measure if you don't have the plan first. So it really is the foundation for everything. And I'll plug Katie, because Katie does strategic planning with anyone across the state who wants it, and she's outstanding. So take advantage of that too.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Call me. I would love to work with your board to do some strategic planning.
And the Center for Nonprofits does it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to also say for those, and we aren't really focusing on boards right now, but boards are an extension. Don't feel like you're alone in the desert wandering around. I mean, use your board, use your board, use your board. And if your board needs help, we can come in and do that. Katie can come in and do that. If you need governance help, call me. If you've got just a question about it. And every year, if you're a member of the center, okay, we have a training called the partnership. And that's if you are lucky enough to have an executive director, a paid staff person, or maybe it's not even a paid staff person, it's a volunteer director and your board chair, come to that. It's called the partnership. And it just really solidifies this need of our board and our executive staff or our executive volunteer working together to solve common goals. So we have that available. It's totally free too. So and we've been putting a lot more free webinars up. So if you need access to that, just let me know. But the great thing is with OFE and OKCMP, we have tons of resources for you that won't even cost a dime.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then the other thing I would add to that with that partnership, we talked a lot about gathering data. It's very important for our foundations to really foster that relationship with your district, because if you're not seen as a valued partner and you're not listening to your district and you're not developing your strategies in communication with your district, then it's going to be hard to get your district on board with sharing the things that you need in order to tell your story really well. And so that's something that we have to be as foundations really thoughtful about all the time, is it's not just a partnership between board and staff, but the district is a major player in that too. And it would do us all a lot of good to keep a good line of communication going and building that good working relationship with our district.
It's imperative. And I know there are a lot of districts, a lot of foundations throughout the country, because I hear from them with NSFA that struggle with that. We in Oklahoma City struggled with that years ago. So it takes a lot of effort, but it is so incredibly important. And I want to, before we close, Katie, if I could make another plug. You mentioned the NSFA annual conference that's going to be virtual. It was going to come to Oklahoma City, but because of our world, we're having it virtual, but I've been able to be part of the planning for it. We have some really great, wonderful speakers. We have the superintendent from Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Ed Fund director, who's our counterpart in Philadelphia, they're going to be doing a keynote just on that, the relationship between the district and the foundation and how important it is. So I hope you'll come. The pricing is great. You don't have to travel. This is a great way to bring your board members in. There's some wonderful pricing opportunities that'll be visible really soon. So I hope you'll consider coming.
Yeah, this is absolutely a huge opportunity, especially for our small foundations that don't have a budget for travel. To be able to attend this national conference and to take in all this great stuff for a really affordable price. So thanks for that plug, Mary. Well, we are kind of coming up against our 1 hour deadline. I want to thank Dan and Mary so much for being here with us today and for all that you've shared about using data to tell your stories. I got a lot of really great ideas out of your webinar, and I know our guests did too. So I just want to say thank you to you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, friends.
Thank you guys. Have a great weekend.
Take care, everybody. We hope you'll join us next week. Thanks a lot.